Morning, everybody, and welcome to those that have joined us nice and early this morning. We are going to give it a few minutes and just let others join the call. So in the meantime, if you want to just be giving yourselves an introduction in the chat box, say who you are, what your role is, and where you're joining us from this morning, that would be great. We'll give it a couple more minutes before we kick off and start with today's session. Thank you. So again, just to let everybody know, we're just giving it another minute just to allow colleagues to join us. So for those that have just joined us now, if you haven't done so already, you could do your introduction in the chat box, letting us know who you are, what you do and where you're joining us from this morning. That would be great. And we'll kick off in about a minute's time. Thank you. Okay, I think we'll get going then. I have just noticed a comment in the chat there. So just to let people know, this is Core Learning Session 4. Absolutely, yes, it is. I know it says Core Learning Event 1 on the title. However, there has been some technical issues where the same link has been used for all of these sessions. So that's certainly been a learning point for us as a delivery team. But just to reassure you all, if you are here for Core Learning Event 4 around tips and techniques and tools for how to deliver your programme, then you're in the right place. So ignore the title. Right, so good morning, everybody. For anybody that is joining for the first time, hasn't seen me before, I'm Lisa Hugh. I'm a member of EastSyst, and I'm going to be hosting the session today. So welcome to colleagues from the two North regions, Northwest and Northeast. And yes, indeed, welcome to Core Learning Event 4, which is the final session of 4 that we've been delivering over the last 4 weeks. So we're on that finishing straight now before you start to take all of the learning that you've had from this module into delivering your future modules as part of the UEC recovery plan work. So just a few little housekeeping things before we kick off. So the usual thing, if you can create an environment that is conducive to good learning, so phones off if possible or on silent if not, do not disturb signs on the doors, switching off your other browsers so that you're not being interrupted by notifications and things, that would be appreciated and certainly would help create a good learning environment for you. However, as we always say, we appreciate that many of you will be doing this as part of your day jobs today, and that you might have to be accessible. It's just a little bit of advice there to try and create a healthy learning environment for you. Based on the feedback that we've had previously, we have got a few breaks today to give you time to just step away from the screen temporarily, reflect on what you've learned within the session, because we are throwing an awful lot at you today. So there will be some breaks where you can go and stretch your legs, etc. And also, as we've said previously, all of the information that you are going to hear and see today will be available to you post the event. I have just done a check-in to see where we're up to with the development of the Futures platform, and it is nearly there. I am reliably informed. Possibly not going live this week, but everything crossed, it should be up and live next week. So all UEC champions will get notification with the link for the Futures site as and when it becomes available, but fingers crossed that should be some point next week. We've got somebody monitoring the chat box today, so if there are any questions, please do pop them in the chat, and my colleague Wakas will be keeping an eye on chat. So we've got a few reflection stops throughout the presentation today where the presenters will be posing some questions, so please do interact, because that makes it easier for the presenters if they've got some reflections that they can connect with there in the chat. Our colleagues in the north, you have definitely been the most interactive group throughout the 4 weeks, so we're expecting you to set the bar today with reflections and interactions in the chat box. No pressure, guys. And then the final thing, Rachel, if you could just move it onto the Menti slide for me, please, or Kate, sorry, whoever's got the slides. We have got a Menti running today. This is purely for evaluation today, so if you could just take down the information within the slides there. You've got the QR code, which you just hold your phone up on your mobile device and zap on your camera, or if you want to go through your web browser, it's menti.com and you enter that code there. At various points throughout the session, we will be putting that information in the chat as well. It is, as I say, purely for evaluation and feedback this week. However, we have learned a great deal from the previous 3 weeks where you have shared your thoughts with us. So I would actively encourage people to continue to share that feedback with us, because when we rerun this core module, which will be round 2, which is going to be around about back end of February, beginning of March next year, we will definitely be using all of the feedback that we've had from you as participants to improve in true continuous improvement style what we've delivered, and hopefully bring something back bigger and better for you in the future. So I think that's everything from me. So please do enjoy this session. Interact as and when requested, if you wouldn't mind, please. And any questions you've got, do pop them in the chat and we'll keep that going. So I think I'm handing over to Kate. Is it Kate? Yes,
that's
I'm handing over
that's
to Kate.
Right. And can I just check that the slides have moved forward, so you should have the Menti slide up now. Is that correct?
For me, Kate, the slide's gone back to slide 1 for me. I don't know how it is for anybody else.
Yeah, same for me, Kate.
Right, I will take them down and put them up again. So bear with me a minute. So
yeah,
can everybody see?
Kate. We're there right now, Kate.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, everyone. So thank you for joining today. And just as really just a reminder of where our journey so far. You know, we've been. This is our final session of the getting our improvement skills and learning about delivering change. So we've done preparing for your journey. We've talked about the leadership. That's the leadership and delivery for your improvement plan, and the importance of that, you know, about gaining trust and listening to listening to people and understanding how they're feeling and what's important to them. And then last week we talked about turning data into intelligence. You know, it's about what matters to me, what's important to the data, what data matters is the ones that we should be talking about. And then today, you know, we're looking at tools and techniques that will support you with your improvement journey. So we've got lots of things in the session today. This is about we're not going to go deep, we're going wide. So we try and give you just a taster of those tools and techniques. We found this is from the Health Foundation. For those that have never looked at the Health Foundation, completely recommend going to have a look at this. And this is about, you know, the habits for improvers. You know, as you go through your improvement journey, you develop habits of improvers. And we will share the article. I think it's already been put in. But this is about, you know, when we first start going out on our improvement journey, we start in that outer circle. But then, you know, as we move forward closer and closer to the middle. So, you know, we start to learn, we start to influence. Then we talk about communication, and then move into the centre, which is, you know, working in co-production with health and social care, working co-productions with those that are part of the change. And sometimes it feels like we're alone. You know, you might feel like, you know, remember the video that we watched with the leadership, with the first man dancing in the field. You know, it might feel that you're alone, but, you know, find your followers, find those people that, you know, will support you with the change. You know, go and take colleagues for cups of coffee. You know, one of my old managers used to say, you know, change starts with coffee and cake. Because, you know, if you take somebody for coffee, you've got engagement for the first for 15 minutes. So, you know, think about this. Think about how you can. Yes, you might feel alone, but what can you do to pull others on, to get people to come and work with you? There's one of my favourite books is Rebels at Work, and in there they talk about, you know, about learning to listen, and, you know, get rid of the white noise and just learn to listen, and, you know, meet and listen with your colleagues to understand what's important for them. So today we're going to be going through more of your journey. So we're going to be preparing for your journey. This is about understanding the problem the problem you've got. And then we're going to look at visualizing, how you can learn to visualize your improvement plan. We're not going to talk about turning data into intelligence, because we've done that. We're going to talk about delivery, you know, 30, 60, 90-day action plans. And then finally, we're going to talk about some new era methodologies that some of you may or may not be aware of. So, so you need your pens and pencils out for today, I think. But at this point, I'm going to hand over to Sarwar. Oh, no, sorry. I forgot there was a question here. So, question here is, what improvement tools are you aware of? So, you know, write them in the chat. So if you put Q1, put the improvement tools you're aware of, and then Q2, what ones have you used? So when I first started my improvement journey, it was with the Productive Ward. So I don't know if people remember the Productive Ward. And that was taking lean methodologies. Lisa, what was your first improvement methodologies you were part of? What tools do you remember?
I was really lucky. There'll be people on the call that can remember the Modernisation Agency days. And my first step out of my clinical background, which was pharmacy, was I got to be a national service improvement lead for the National Medicines Management Collaborative. So I was very, very lucky that I got to go to Leicester every week under the wonderful Helen Bevan and have all of my training. And so just did the basic stuff, the capacity and demand, the process mapping, model for improvement, all of that kind of thing. But that was coming up to being 20 years ago now, and those foundations have definitely stood me in good stead through that last 20 years for sure.
Yeah, I can remember doing a similar thing for the Modernisation Agency and having the little box of books that you would give us. Wakas, is there anything happening in the chat with what are people saying in the chat for their tools that they've used or are aware of?
Yeah, I've got responses. Amanda, in response to question 1, said QSA. And Tracy, I guess, mentioned YouTube. For question 2, in fact, we've got 2 more responses for Q1. DMake framework, ESIST, Aqua, PDSA. And for question 2, we have 5 reasons why fishbone diagrams. That's the responses we have so far.
That's brilliant. And, you know, feel free to put some more in through the session, because it'd just be good to know if there's ones you're curious about as well. So thank you very much for putting that. And at this point, I will hand over to Sawa.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you again at our last session. So I'm just going to take you through a bit of a whistle stop regarding some of the elements that you would consider first. So you may remember this that we showed at the first session. This is the 6 questions that you would ask when you're starting to look at your improvement journey. So the what, the who, the when, the where, the how, the why. So we're just going to be focused on today on the what and the why today. But go on to this. This is probably my version of a toolbox or a QI toolbox. It identifies some of the key tools that you would probably use in your toolbox. So you'd have a saw to cut through the complexity. You've got the tape measure to measure progress and successes. You've got the hard hat that would protect you from fallout that's beyond your control, because obviously that's a real life area. You've got the headphones to cut out the noise, the white noise, so you can focus down on what matters to you and your teams. You've got the paintbrush to help you visualize your work. So we're going to be talking about that. Rachel's going to be discussing process mapping and PDSAs. You've got the plans to help everyone keep focus on that vision that you've identified. The alignment measure that will help you align what you're doing with the strategic goals and aims of your organization, as well as the national goals. You've got the screw tightening device. I don't know what it's called. I'm not a tool person. To apply pressure in the right places. So this is just our sort of visual interpretation of what that toolbox looks like and what Kate mentioned earlier on. So I'm going to be talking through the root cause analysis. It's already been mentioned, the 5 whys, and you probably all already use it. You're probably aware of it, but I just wanted to sort of raise this because this is probably one of the simplest tools in your arsenal to identify root cause analysis. It's quite simple to use. It originated by a gentleman called Sakichi Toyoda, the Japanese industrialist inventor and the founder of Toyota Industries. We all go back to Lean in Toyota, and it was about the 30s that it was identified and used, and it's been sort of developed using the tried and tested methodology of go and see philosophy. So instead of relying on the word of mouth, you're actually going down to the shop floor and understanding exactly what's happening and seeing it for yourself. So that observation element of the 5 whys and root cause is really important for us. So instead of sort of sitting there thinking, well, we think this is happening, we think that's happening, best thing to do is to actually go down, have a look for yourself, go through the walkthrough with the colleagues actually doing the doing, and actually see for yourself exactly what's happening. Now, we've got examples of this in the process mapping that we're going to share with you later on, but this for me is quite a simple way of looking at what's going on, defining that issue, looking at Why is it happening? Ask the question why 5 times until you get to the root cause. And that's where you can start looking at action planning and looking at how you actually can actually manage and mitigate some of the reasons that you've identified. So the main steps are here. I mean, I don't want to go through all of them because you're probably already aware of the 5 whys, but basically is to be what colleagues suggested to me was be as curious as a 5-year-old. So ask those questions, bring together individuals who are familiar with the problem that they're facing, and get someone to facilitate that conversation so everybody can be on board. Get someone to scribe, because it's really important that you sort of are able to sort of note down exactly what's happening, define that problem that they're facing, observe it, we've talked about, and facilitate that question. Try and understand exactly what's going on and why it's happening, rather than getting people jumping forward to a solution. And then follow that through with that line of inquiry and get people to sort of start questioning for themselves as to what's happening and why it's happening in the way it is. So I'm going to quickly talk through the Ishikawa fishbowl model, and another cause and effect, which links to the 5 whys. So you basically, this gentleman, Dr. Kaori Ishikawa, was a Japanese organizational theorist and professor of engineering in the Faculty of University of Tokyo, and has written countless documents and books on the quality management and innovations of quality management. He also won the Deming Award. So he basically looked at the Ishikawa fishbowl model as a way of looking at how you can actually define what's happening based on the lines of inquiry. So he looked at it through improving the communication across the system and getting people to communicate better using this tool. Now, the 5 whys, why use the 5 whys? Basically, it shows you a visual representation of what your current state is. It identifies the major categories of what those problem areas are. So they could be materials, processes, people, whatever you've identified, but it's about making sure that you get people engaged in that early stage, so that we can actually start looking at, what's the reason. And also for me, it's about getting people to start looking at raising their voices, because sometimes when we're working in teams, we have those hidden voices, and this is a good way of getting everybody on board. You'd consider having some flip chart papering, typical QI sort of mentality. You'd have flip chart paper, post-it notes and pens, and you'd get everyone to identify one major area for each of the sort of major elements that they've raised, and then you work through what that would look like. And this is a diagram. We'll be sharing these diagrams with you. This one obviously has got labels identified, but the ones that we're going to be sharing will not have labels. That's just so that you can edit and add in your own labels and your own problem statements. And basically, it's just about getting people to identify. So you would have, so under people, you'd have staff, you may have patients, you may have consultants, it could be anyone. And then within that, you'd identify, well, why have you identified so-and-so person as part of this document? And then you'd sort of, using the 5 whys, you drill down further as to what that would be. And then as you work through that statement, you'd actually get to your problem statement, and you would identify as to why those issues have occurred and what matters to people. And it gets rid of all the sort of people's sort of sense of, well, am I part of this? You're actually giving permission for people to get engaged. Now, this is one I picked up. It's been already completed by the neonatal team, and this is what they came up with in terms of their fishbone diagram. So under people, they've got staffing, they've got doctors, nurses, paramedics, patients. For equipment, they've got dispenser, location, number, and malfunctions. So you can see how you can actually drill down each element that fits into that spine of the fish, and it heads towards the mouth of the fish, where you actually identify your aim and your problem statement as to what's going on. But beware that sometimes people may want to jump to solutions. Using this methodical way of working, you'll be able to identify exactly what does happen and why it's happening the way it's happening, and then it will help you identify exactly what your sort of next stages should be and how you can prevent that from happening. Now, you may realize I've mentioned 5 Whys and the fishbone together, and that's because when you're working in an improvement sort of lens, some of these tools join up together, they complement each other, so they help you understand what's happening better. So 5 Whys is a very simple way of working. It identifies exactly what's going on 555. But then if you're using the fishbone, you can actually use the 5 Whys to identify why people have identified those core elements, and then that gets that communication going. It gets people energized and enthused, and it gets everyone engaged. So in the chat, I'd like you to sort of let me know if you've actually used either 5 Whys or the fishbone diagram Ishikawa before, and if you've got any examples that you want to share in the chat, that'd be really helpful. And this is just to get to understand, you know, if you've actually used them, have you actually had any issues but whilst using them, what's happened, and if you've got any examples, but also any ideas as to how you can help manage those conversations using these tools would be really helpful. And if there's any other questions regarding that you want to post to me, please do so in the chat. So I'm going to be talking through the stakeholder engagement next. And this is talking about basically why you would engage stakeholders, what it looks like, and how best to work forward. Now, there's lots of different tools and technologies and ways of working. People have different ways of engaging stakeholders, but I find that these 4 stages are really the sort of core of stakeholder engagement. So you'd identify everyone who's involved in your project, your project area, but also who needs to be involved. So obviously not everyone who's interested may not be involved, so you need to get people who are doing the doing also involved. And then you'd need to prioritize those people. So you'd have a big list of people, you'd prioritize them, you'd categorize them in terms of who needs to be involved more and who needs to be involved in a different way. So it could be you identify a few lists of people, and then you identify exactly how you're going to engage them and when are you going to engage them. You may identify someone early stages, but then they don't need to be involved at that stage. They may need to be involved later on because their skills and where they're based. So if not now, when? So you need to sort of have a matrix in terms of looking at what that would look like in terms of, you know, when would you engage? Maybe have a Gantt chart someone mentioned in the chat as to when you could best sort of engage them. And then understand who they are, what matters to them, why are they engaged. So it's about storytelling. We mentioned at Core Learning Event 1 is getting to understand who they are, who are your stakeholders and why are they engaged. And it could be that they're engaged for an emotional, personal reason. They may have had family members. Some of us who are actually leading this session have had face-to-face emotional responses to that because we've been involved at the core phase with our family members. So listen intently, listen with an active ear and listen with that third ear. So you're looking at the words, the music and the dance as well in terms of how they're engaged and why they're engaged. And actually talking about engagement, look at how you're actually going to maintain that engagement. What's that commitment to keep involved, and how you're going to keep that momentum going with that engagement, because obviously as you move forward, things people lose interest because there's the next best things coming on. So it's about engaging. How you're going to keep them engaged, and one way could be through active communication. And I've just put an example, a definition of what a stakeholder is just there, so you can have a quick read of that. And obviously you'll get a copy of these slides, so you'll be able to go through it at your leisure. And it'd be good to sort of see, if you've got ideas as to how you engage your stakeholders as we progress. It'd be useful to see if you've got any innovative, creative ways of engaging people. That'd be really good. And how you would incentivize engagement. That'd be really helpful as well. So this is the stages of your project. And I thought as your final sort of finale, if you like, final session, we talk about the stages of your project, but also how you would engage stakeholders in that, in each level. So for example, if you're starting out and in your initial engagement, you may want to look at what you're aiming to improve, and you identify and involve, and you connect with key stakeholder can help you do that. So is your aim clear? Is your goal clear? Is your scope something that people can relate to? We'll be talking about later on. We keep going back to that SMARTY goal, if you recall from Core Learning Event 1. So if you keep that in mind as you move forward, and looking at discovering and defining your scope. Now, what does that look like? What's your current state look like? We're going to be talking about process mapping later on, but it's about visualizing what's happening and getting your stakeholders to actually visualize and see what's happening, and make sure that they're involved actively in helping you define that. So when you're looking at your process mapping and your visualization of your project, how are your stakeholders involved in that helping you visualization? They may have creative ideas that may or may not necessarily fit in with your project goal, but use a car park methodology to identify and hold that in an area where you can come back to it. Could be that you use it later on. And then diagnostics, identify the root cause. We've just discussed about challenges and what those root causes are for yourselves. And you can use staff narratives. We've got a tool that we're not going to be talking about today, but it's called evidence-based practice, evidence-based design, experience-based. So it's basically looking at people's experiences and designing your services around their experience. So I'm looking at that, when I said go and see, you may have nuggets in terms of getting people's experiences to help you design. So what hasn't worked previously, identify that. I know sometimes see if it hasn't worked, then why should we do that? But then there's learning there as well. And you could use the 5 whys and the storyboard toolkit to actually help you capture those experiences and outcomes, and then design and plan through that stakeholder engagement. Once you've identified, you can actually look at your future state map and what that looks like. What else is needed? Is it clear enough, and do stakeholders understand what it is that you're trying to get at, and is it specific enough for them and patients and carers, frontline staff, to actually understand what you're trying to do? Because obviously if people don't understand their engagement and their involvement in it, then something's gone wrong in that journey, and then you need to go back and make sure that stakeholders are involved and they actually understand what you're trying to do. And then looking through testing and planning, we're going to talk about PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act, and looking at those cycles of change and how you've actually engaged stakeholders through those cycles of change, because it's really important that when you're planning, you have people involved. When you're doing, people are walking alongside you to actually see what's being done. And then it's really important to study. Sometimes we can do the PD and A, but not really study. And I think some of us have got experience where we've gone through the whole plan to study app model, but then people haven't spent enough time on studying and they go into acting. If you want to make things, if you want to test and implement, you need to make sure that you pay particular focus on all of those areas. And then review, embed and sustain, evaluate what you've done, evaluate your engagement and your stakeholder involvement, make sure they're actively involved in that process. And, you know, when you're writing case studies or a poster, identify your successes and celebrate them alongside your stakeholders. Now, you could have, I think someone's got their, if someone could mute themselves, that'd be really helpful. And then what you could do is also be creative in the way you review, embed and sustain. You could actually, using sketch notes, for example, you could actually identify what you've done in a poster using sketch notes. So if anyone's aware of Horizons, they've got some phenomenal sketch notes that you could have a look at if you wanted to use that methodology. And now just going back into identifying your stakeholders, who are they, who's involved, and on who has the knowledge. Sometimes we don't actually engage those with the knowledge. So you may want to engage people like your analytics. And then if you're brainstorming, I know some people have an issue with the word brainstorm, but in this instance, it's by identifying and dumping, making a list of everybody who needs to be involved. And initially, if you just do a massive flip chart with everybody's name on, then you can categorize and clump people into where you want their engagement best, and you have those conversations with people. And then prioritizing, if you're prioritizing your stakeholders, you probably prioritize them into these 3 areas. So your initial internal stakeholders would be your staff, it would be the management, it could be the providers that you work alongside, it could even be your commissioners that are working to help improve where you are. It could be your associated stakeholders, and those are people like your patients, your carers, their families, the suppliers you have coming into your bodies, allied health bodies. It could be people like us coming in to help support you, and it could be your partner agencies that come in and help support you in certain areas, and they may have skills that you know, you could really value when you're working through your project. And it could be an external stakeholders, so that's people like the media. I know sometimes we have a love-hate relationship with the media, but they're also our stakeholders there. And special interest groups, PALS, for example, Health Watch. You could have the Royal Colleges as your external bodies as well. And then also, this is an analogy that we've I don't want to use the word stolen. We're using from the primary care improvement team developed this bus analogy. Is about understanding who's on the bus and why are they on the bus. Listen and understand their story as to why they're involved. And storytelling is a phenomenal tool when you're actually engaging people, getting them to tell you their story as to why they're involved. So, for example, I was involved in a piece of work looking at frailty. And when I was asked about that, so why I was involved because I had 2 frail parents who needed care, and it was an emotional journey for me. So I was able to share why I was involved through storytelling. And it might be useful, I don't know if you use that, but in your sort of protective group, if you like, of your project team, to actually start practicing some of these tools as to why and how they work, and maybe sort of hone them in. With that, you may have your QI faculty, your Qs, someone mentioned, you could use them to help you understand that better, and using that SMARTY model and ensuring that you've got accessibility and that all stakeholders are able to participate. So, for example, if you're having an event, ensure that the event is accessible for people who are wheelchair users. There's hearing loop for people who are hard of hearing. You have you're inclusive in your approach, so the languages that you use is supportive and understanding. So if you go back to that whole thing of kindness built into everything that you're doing. And it's about ensuring that those who aren't on the bus, who want to be on the bus, can come onto the bus, and that, you know, if there's a block in the road, who are those people blocking that road and why that's there. So we're going back to the 5 whys, and then who is driving the bus. So it's really clear to understand who's at the helm and why are they at the helm, and do they actually need to be at the helm, and does someone else need to be there. And it's also about understanding, you know, is a driver happy during that bus? Are they driving under duress? That maybe that could come in terms of the way they're driving, if it's a haphazard way of driving. And are we going in the right direction? And who's decided what that right direction is? And it's about, you know, whose line is it, if there's anyone blocking that road, and why they're blocking that. And it's about understanding and making sure that you've set that, you know. And if it's not a bus, then what could it be? Could it be a Ferrari? Are you ready for a Ferrari to be driven in your improvement project, or do you want to stick with the bus? And who's collecting the fares, or is there funding involved, and what does that look like, and who is holding the purse strings? So just in reflections, really, in terms of stakeholders, have you used any of the things that we've discussed today? Have you broken it down in the way we've sort of mentioned today? And if you've got a different way of working, what have you used? Do you have a matrix? We'll be sharing the matrix and other tools with you after this chat. So if you just want to drop into the chat as to you know, where we are with that. Waqas, can I come to you and ask you if there's anything in the chat, or have I just talked to death?
Oh, there are a few bits, and I've actually lost track of it now. I mean, going back to the chat, the first couple of questions we asked, have you seen these tools used before, and would you like to share any examples? I mean, I can go from there. The responses from various colleagues indicate a mix of familiarity and experience with the problem-solving tools. The fishbone diagram is highlighted as particularly helpful for new teams and across providers. And it's quite interesting to see how these techniques have found utility in different scenarios, from healthcare to personal situations as well. Can highlight some of the responses if you are. Yeah. I think there was the 5 whys technique is acknowledged as a valuable tool for investigating the root causes of issues. Kate's playful use of the 5 whys with her children demonstrates adaptability even in non-professional context. The comment by Anna about the usefulness of these tools in a wider group setting, it suggests the versatility in facilitating collaborative problem solving. And Amy has previously used 5 whys techniques and the fishbone diagram. It shows practical applications, you know, to social media presence as well.
Great. No, that's fine. And you know what, with the 5 whys, you could be having a corridor conversation. You know, we have those, don't we, where someone say, well, I don't know about this and I'm not sure if I can do this, and then you can just weave it into the conversation. Oh, well, why is that then? And you can drill down just in that few minutes that you're in that conversation. And these are quite sort of flexible tools that you use. And I thought, you know, we don't want to sort of bombard you with SPCs and all of this. We just wanted to give you a gentle sort of way in as your taster for QI tools and for root cause analysis. And we will be sharing. So if there's anything else, just drop it in the chat. And if you're a reflector like me, it may come to you after. So if you want to use a UEC Champions chat, you can add in if you've got any other needs, or if you want to ask anything there, you can use it there. And we're going to just have a quick pause there, because I'm conscious, or we're conscious, that we've taken you from, here are QI improvers, this is your toolkit, and then we've gone through the 5 whys and the fishbone and the stakeholder, and we thought we'd give you a 5-minute reflector break, if that's okay with you, and then we can sort of come back in where we're going to be talking about visualization.
Okay, Sarwar, do you want to confirm that? I make it 10:43.
Yeah.
So if we ask colleagues to be back promptly at 10:48, please,
Yes,
because we are
please.
slightly behind, guys. So 10:48, quick 5-minute break, and then we'll kick off with the next section. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I make it 10:48. I think we're back. I know that was a very quick break, but hopefully it's given people opportunity to stretch the legs and take a bit of time to reflect on what was discussed in the first part of the session. So I just want to recap on what Kate said right at the very beginning of this session. What we're aiming to do with this core learning event 4 is to do a bit of a recap on the previous 3 weeks and offer up some tools and techniques that you might want to use in each one of those sections. So the first part of the session today has been what was covered in core learning event 1 around preparing for your improvement journey. And what we're about to go into is the core learning event 2 session, and how we are going to utilise 2 tools, which is the driver diagram and process mapping. Now, again, just reiterating what Kate said this morning, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are a range of tools available, and as part of the NHS Futures platform, we will be creating links to a raft of various tools and also suggesting other sites that you might want to go to develop your knowledge and skills. But for today, we're just doing a very quick recap, and we absolutely appreciate it. Will feel a bit whistle stop to a lot of people, but do be assured that the resources will be available to you as you move into your true improvement journeys as part of the modules that you're working on within your integrated care system. So next slide, please, Rachel. So I'm going to talk very, very briefly just on driver diagrams today. And so really and truly, driver diagrams around visualizing your what. Next slide, please, Rachel. So as we get into this, we've got a little video shortly, very nice, succinct little video that talks about a driver diagram and what it is. But just want you to reflect on something that was shared back in Core Learning Event 1 around SMART-T goals. Sarwar took us through this back in week 1, where we included the inclusive and the equitable to the SMART goals previously. So when you are thinking about your aim, your vision, your goal, what you want to achieve within your improvement piece of work, then please do remember SMART-T goals. So I think when we move on to the next slide now, we've got a nice little video that goes through and tells us all about what a driver diagram is. Thank you, Rachel. Rachel, you're on mute.
Lovely. Let me know if there's any challenges with sound.
Okay, thank you.
Oops, let's go back.
Okay, so just a nice, quick, succinct video there just to take you through driver diagrams and how to use them. Kate has kindly popped the link in the chat box there, and she has noted it was remiss of me not to note that we have, I'm not going to say what Sarwar said, we haven't stolen, we've pinched with pride from our colleagues at Morecambe Bay Hospital Improvement Team there. But there'll be other things. If you Google driver diagrams, you will find all sorts of things. Again, we will be making all of these resources available to you once the future site is up and running. Just a reminder, because I did see something in the chat, it's not up and running yet. Hopefully next week it'll be up and running, and you will be advised of when it's up and running and how to access it through a link through the generic inbox, the UEC Champions generic inbox. Okay, so here we've got a template of a driver diagram. It's just a different sort of setup to what you've just seen within the video. And if we move on to the next slide, please, Rachel, this is sort of an example of using a driver diagram in practice. So this was utilised with a system and the national team to look at setting up care coordination across a system. So obviously starting at the far left hand side is the aim, and the aim here is definitely got SMART principles within it. So by October 2023, wanting to significantly reduce unnecessary conveyances. And then we've got the 50 to 70% of ICS systems through embedding care coordination approach, ensuring the majority of 999 and 111 patients are treated as close to home as possible. So we've got a good SMART aim there. And then within the primary drivers, we've got some key principles in there. So there'll be a discovery diagnostic that is done to be able to ascertain the baseline of where things are at, and therefore then consider what your reduction would look like and what milestones you might want to set to achieve that reduction over a period of time. Talks about capacity and demand in there, talks about developing the model for improvement and tests of change. And it also talks about delivery of national and regional events. So we've got some key primary drivers there, supported by secondary drivers. So if we just look at that one at the top around the discovery diagnostic, we've gone into a bit more detail around using SEDIT data, which is the information that they're getting it right first time team use. SEDIT is specific to ED. So if anybody wanted any information on that, I think it was discussed last week in Core Learning Event 3 through what Chris and the team would have delivered. So again, suggesting that as a secondary driver, doing some observation assessments and a report to output from those observation assessments, and conducting another tool such as ATED, which is the Alternatives to ED tool for those that may not be aware of it. So some secondary drivers there, and out of that then you've got the change ideas. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of that. It's just an example of where a driver diagram has been used at a national level and has been proved to be useful to keep the improvement journey on track throughout. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to hand over to Rachel, who's going to talk to us now about process mapping. Over to you, Rachel.
Lovely. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so yeah, just to share a little intro, as Lisa said, really touching into these tools around another visualizations tool that's really helpful to start understanding more about what is the problem that we want to solve by looking at your processes. So a bit more about the what, really. Some, as I've said, will be familiar with process mapping. I know you've mentioned it in the chat. What I'll share with you, some of the benefits, a little bit about putting them together, and a couple of examples. So what is a process map? You can see on the picture here an overview of one that's been made and compiled by lots of white paper and sticky post-it notes, and it's a visual representation of an actual process. And putting this together and developing this is, you know, working together with others and stakeholders and people who actually are part of the process, that interact with the process, that operate the process or are impacted by the process. So getting the right people in the room is key. So it gives us a way of getting a much fuller picture of what is actually happening. Sometimes we can think we know what a process looks like, but actually when we map it out, what actually happens is quite different. You may be familiar as well with swim lanes technique, where we look at a process and concurrent activities or concurrent roles to see how they align. And you might also be familiar with value stream mapping. So there's a number of different slightly different approaches, but they tend to be lean based and looking at waste and looking at safety. Okay, so what are the benefits of process mapping? So by putting together a process map, as I said, it really helps us to understand the current state reality of any process. So warts and all, from beginning to end. And by putting together a process map, mapping out that process, we can look at where the problems might be, where the delays might be, where the waste might be, and any bottlenecks and constraints. And from a safety perspective, it can also tell us where the process is also unreliable or potentially could cause harm. So when we think about, we've talked about measures in the last session, and we've talked a little bit about measures today, but it's giving us a snapshot and a baseline of where we are now. And if we can get that baseline, when we do improvement, we can then have a measure to see, you know, have we made an improvement and where have we made the improvement and by how much. So once we've got the process, sort of an overview of the process, we can start to select and prioritise, as Lisa was saying there, some of the projects and change projects that we might want to go and test. So within the aims diagram, some of those ideas were on the right hand side. With a process map, we'll wean them out as we go through that process. But a key fundamental really with process mapping, and many of you will have experienced this and know this, is it's not a solo game. It's not necessarily something that you sit on a computer and you map out that process. Actually, the power of process mapping is in the collaboration and the thought and the sharing and the different perspectives of all those that are part of the process. And by doing that and enabling people to have a voice, it also starts to develop that shared understanding and ownership. So it's about getting people together either in a room or doing it via Zoom, facilitated. So again, we've mentioned here about ownership and the perspectives here, bringing them together. We can look at the end-to-end process and we can see really where the complexities are in a process. We can have that conversation about the process, and the conversation is about the process, not about individuals. So that's really helpful, and really helpful for it to be facilitated, because it can really start to tease out that process perspective rather than personalities, and be able to talk about some of the crunchy, difficult stuff. Okay. So once you start to embark on developing a process map, the first things first is about understanding the issue. So is the issue that we want to resolve, is it clear, you know, and how do we know that? What evidence have we got that we're using to substantiate it? And do we think that, and does the evidence suggest that we could resolve some of the issue or the issue by using this approach or looking at these different ideas that come through? Will it benefit patients and staff? And is it worth the investment of time and also resource? So when we look at process mapping from a process perspective, it's got an overview of 4 stages that, again, I'll briefly share. The first part is, again, as Sarwar was saying earlier as well, about the key point about the planning, getting the planning right, you know, what it is you're wanting to achieve, make sure you've got a facilitator, gather your stakeholders to start to understand what the process is, and then start to walk through together and feel that process. So make sure you've got the right people in the room and gather any preliminary data that you have. It doesn't mean that things won't change as you move forward, but what data have you got at the moment that's helping inform you? And you may well find through the process that there's other sources of data that you need to obtain that will tell you even more. So that's the first stage. The second part is once you have your stakeholders, you've engaged those who are close to the process, you've got a venue, etc. You can then map out the process itself. And within the process, you will put a start and an end and some decision points through that. The third part, when you have mapped out a process, you'll analyze it, look at the flows, look at the data. And then the fourth is you have a current state map. So what does the future map state look like? So once we know what the reality is, you know, what does good look like? So they're the 4 overview stages that you will follow. And again, I've mentioned that the first stage is the planning stage. So it could be a venue, it could be virtual. Think about how long it will take, how much time you need. Probably do want to give people refreshments if we're in a room working together, doing a lot of thinking. But also make sure you've got enough time to plan ahead to think about the analysis stage as well. The second part where we map it out is, again, 3 questions. What will you map? And then you're going to use either brown paper or flip chart paper. You'll need a number of resources, post-it notes, Sharpie pens, but we can share those in the slide deck when we send it out to you. But you'd basically roll out your paper and you establish which part of which process are you going to map and agree that, and make sure you're very clear with a heading of what it's about. I've given an example here that links from a primary care perspective. Some of the information within these slides is, you know, fortunately been informed through the primary care improvement team as well. So just to acknowledge that. When we've got the start of the process on the left, the end of the process on the right. So be clear where your process is going to start and where your process is going to end. And also make sure that you've dated it. With any process mapping, you will want a key. This happens to be the key that is utilised in this example. So process steps are going to be in yellow, decisions are going to be in the green, any issues or problems that we come across are going to be just posted and captured for now in pink, and any ideas are going to be captured for now in blue. So one of the challenges we've got is what is the right level of detail when we progress process map. There isn't really any single right level of detail. It does vary by project, but it is about getting the balance right. So not having too much detail and going into too much detail that you get so bogged down, but not having enough detail so that you're not actually able to identify any of the problems with that process. And you might find you map a process, but then realize that actually you need to then go at a deeper level for parts of the process that you've mapped. It's an iterative process, so it's not a one-off event, and you will want to share this process map in the staff room or with colleagues or with partners to give them opportunity also to view the process map and make their amendments and thoughts on it as well. So this again is just an overview conceptual model, I suppose, of a process map. We've got our title again, we've got our key at the bottom, and you can see here the yellow post-its are all of the steps or activities within the process. And then the green here is the decision. And you can see there where it goes off to the bottom and off to the right, because the decision may well have been a yes or no example. And then follows a process, and then there's some more decisions. So that's how you're using the key, and that's how you're mapping the process. You also have the pink post-its on here and blue ones. Again, pink were for any issues or problems. So some issues and problems occurred here, and blue are where we've captured any ideas. Yeah, these are really helpful for thinking and considering for your ideas to test. So capturing those is really, really essential. And actually, if you didn't have a lot of pinks or problems on there, you'd wonder why you were process mapping this process, perhaps. Okay. There's a little bit more on this process map as well, which is the blue lines, and the blue lines link to, we talked about value stream mapping earlier, it links to the value, some of which can be non-add value and some of which can be value added. And in this perspective, we're looking at the time it's taken to do each part of that process. Okay, so just an overview of what that looks like. So once you've mapped your process map, you'd analyze it and look for improvements. So as I've mentioned on the previous slide, you know, you're looking at the time between each step, looking for any bottlenecks, looking for the parts that may or may not add value in light of staff and in light of patients' perspective and experience, and looking at your steps and your handovers. So once you've mapped your process, you would secure the map, agree consensus with the group that you're working with. Are there any other amendments, any other additions? Who else might we need to share it with? What's our time frame for sharing? And absolutely document the process. So take pictures, etc., to capture that and identify, as I've said, those areas for any issues and also any great ideas. And then you'll develop your action plan. So at that point, you've process mapped one of your processes. And then stage 4 is where you would look at improving. So you'd look at that current state map, and then you'd map again the future state map, looking at where the opportunities are and also prioritize those ideas for changes. So that again is a very, very brief overview. Couple of tips for success. I won't go through them all because you'll be able to see them in this with the slides, but really get to understand the current state. You know, make sure you've got representation of the right people. If people can't make it and there aren't enough for the different perspectives, reschedule, because it's the quality of the conversation as well that's really important. Be mindful of clinicians who may well require, and other stakeholders who may require a greater lead time of 6 weeks or so to be part of this process. Make sure you do circulate the map, and also, you know, doing this work does require, you know, an understanding of where the ownership sits within the process. So it is about being able to have an open and honest culture and conversation about what's working, what isn't. If we stick to the process as our framing, that can be really helpful, and having those conversations is going to develop you as a team as well. Things to absolutely avoid is designing the new process as you go. Just capture your issues, capture your ideas, but it's not right now that we start to develop those whilst we're mapping a current state. Stick to the facts, stick to the process, allow individuals to share their perspective. So if someone hasn't spoken yet, you know, give them the opportunity to reflect and share and contribute, and just be mindful that you don't start to get too distracted and go too off track. So it does require that focused facilitation to get the map down in the first instance. I'm going to share with you just a couple of examples before I conclude this short section for you. And this one is a really interesting one when we think about the value of bringing in different perspectives. This is an example from a GP perspective. A certain piece of work when we asked about repeat prescribing, and this is what they experienced as the process. And actually that's, you know, that's correct if that's the part of the process they engage with. Yeah, it's understandable. When actually it was taken more widely and the process mapping was actually undertaken with wider staff and wider stakeholders, this was the reality of what the process map looked like. So, you know, it just shows how powerful powerful it is. And that's an example of a process map using the key that they wish to use. And then again, I'll share you one more example. This is an example of a lean map that was produced for a community-based provider. And their aim was to process map the current therapy services to identify some of the interconnected pathway steps and decisions. So they had a specific intention for this process map. They wanted to look at a gap analysis and then look at their areas for improvement. And this was their future state. So you can see here within their intent that they've pulled out and focused around the many decisions and the decision points in here. And this is a map that worked for them. From here, they're able to then start to look at what happens at each of those stages, and they can consult with staff and consult with partners around taking this project to the next stage. So that kind of brings you together, just, you know, some benefits of process mapping, what it is, a little bit about how to go about it, and just a couple of examples just to show you that, you know, it's contextual, and they can, you know, they can look quite differently. Some can be really complex. Simple processes might be, you know, a lot simpler to work through. So 2 questions that I'll just leave in the chat for you to be lovely to get your sense of what's your experience of process mapping. But for me, really, it's, you know, what worked well? When did it really work well for you? And when were the occasions where it didn't quite work so well and didn't get you where you needed to get to? So if you can share some of those in the chat, that would be fantastic. And we are about to go, I think, onto another pause for 5 minutes. But do we want to just leave those thoughts in the chat? I'll just check with colleagues and go for a break. I think, given our timing, that's probably the right thing to do. So yeah, lovely. And as I said, all of your learning we can share, we'd love to share within this community. We know we've got lots of experience and expertise within this community, and it is about sharing that and building this community to what you want it to be. So let's have a 5-minute pause and reflect again. It's 11:19 by my computer. So if we could all come back by 11:24, that would be great. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I make that 11:24 dead on now. Can I just do a sense check? Who's picking up the next section, Rachel? Is that Sarwar or Kate or you?
Yeah, it's Sarwar, or I can continue to, yeah, it's Sarwar for a couple of slides, yeah.
Okay, over to you then, Sarwar, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to quickly and briefly take you through the next step. But what I wanted to talk about is when you've actually done all of your process mapping and you looked at your PDSA, it's then time to identify, you know, what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So we found this tool quite useful. It's called the impact versus effort grid. So basically what you do is you plot in there with your key people what's going to happen where. So once you've got your driver diagram present, you can identify, you know, what your improvement ideas are and which project you want to start working on first. So anything that has low effort and high reward, you would put in the top box, and those would be your major projects. So those would be something that you can do quickly with less effort. So it's a bit like a win-win. And then for a high effort, low reward, it's something that you want to do, but the thing is, it's going to take you a lot more time, energy, and resources to do. But then the reward isn't as much as you would like. And then for quick wins is something that you can do quickly. So you've got low effort, minimum reward, but you can do it quickly. So I think if you go around the box, it shows you, you know, how you can actually start to look at, you know, the impact that you want to make versus the effort of that improvement. So to the bottom right hand boxes, the nice to have, those may be things that you really want to do, things that you're really excited about doing, but the thing is they won't yield us the reward that you need in order to get your project to where you want it to do. And it's got very limited it's got very limited impact on what you're trying to do. So it might be useful to visualize and have that conversation with colleagues in terms of how you want to move forward. The next bit is your 30, 60, 90-day planning cycle. Some of you would have already heard of this one. So basically, once you've done your 5 whys, you've got, you know what your root causes are, you know what your problem statements are, you work through your process mapping, so you've identified where your issues are, you've done your PDSA, and then this one is basically setting out your planning. So what are you going to do in your first 30 days planning? You're going to learn, you're going to look at what data you've got, what you need in terms of that data, who you need to actually engage with, and what that would look like. So you set out what you're going to do for the first 30 days. And then for the next 60 days, you're going to build that into that project plan. What you're going to do, how you're going to do it, who's involved, which area you're going to focus on, and start looking at pulling that project planning together. And then for the 90 days, you're actually prioritizing what you're doing, how you're doing it, and if it's smarty enough for what you're trying to do. So this is just a quick, very simple sort of focus on, you know, how you would use your planning cycles. And some people have mentioned in the chat that A3 project planning tool, that's also planning on a page and how you would actually move forward. So, I mean, quick and simple. This is what you do, how you do it, how you would actually embed into that. And it's about making sure that you stick to what you've developed, but also be mindful of the fact that it's got to be something that everyone's on board with. Is that okay? I'll just pass over to Rachel now for the model for improvement.
And I'll take back control of the slides. Lovely. Thank you, Sarwar. So yeah, I'm now we're now kind of heading to the kind of the final sections of today's learning event, and I'm going to bring in just an overview of the model for improvement. So we're looking at delivery here. We've talked about the effort versus impact, so identifying the ideas, looking at which ones we might want to test and prioritising those, and also looking at our 30 and 60 and 90. So again, many of you will be familiar with the Model for Improvement. Many of you may not also be familiar. This is a core improvement framework, improvement approach. And just to share with you, as we haven't shared it thus far in the programme, but you will be using it moving forward, there are two parts to the model. We've got 3 key questions, and these should in a way feel quite familiar to you now, because these are the questions that we've been covering thus far. So what are we trying to accomplish? What is our aim? What is our SMARTY? How will we know that the change that we undertake is an improvement? And that is where we link to what measures have we got? How much? By when do we want to achieve? And where are our measures and where's our data that we're going to use to measure? And then the third question is, what change can we make that will result in improvement? And that's been what the majority of today has been about, getting to the point where we understand the problem and identifying the areas to test. So we then get to the bottom part of our model, which is the Plan, Do, Study, Act. So here again, I've just shared on this slide for you moving forward. We've got aims, we've got measures, and then now we're looking at what the intention is. Okay, so the Plan, Do, Study, Act approach is it's a key to the improvement methodology. Sometimes when we're sort of confronted with situations, we tend to just slip into traditional models, but the using this PD, Plan, Do, Study, Act, cycle and approach really provides us with some structure when we want to test a process. And, you know, I'm sure we hear all the time, oh, we tried that before, it didn't work, or we tried that before and we don't remember the outcome. If we use the Plan, Do, Study, Act and we document it well, we can see in future what things we did test and what things we did try, whether they worked, whether they didn't, and what the outcome was. And so frequently we don't capture that to know to try again in a different way, maybe, or at a different time in a different context. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail just about the 4 areas of the Plan, Do, Study, Act, just explore it a little bit more. It's a 4-step cycle. It gives us a disciplined approach, and it's about ensuring that we do follow this approach every time we do a cycle and a test of change. So by doing that, we can rapidly prototype and test out ideas for ourselves and with our teams. So plan stage here is about having a clear idea, a clear objective, what it is we're wanting to achieve. We'll have made some predictions. We'll maybe have a hypothesis about what we think may happen or what we hope to intend. But again, keep very open on that. But we will have some predictions there. And then it's the planning. So who needs to be involved? What you're going to test? When is the best time to test it? Where you're going to test the idea on and on whom? So it might be, you know, one patient going through one part of the service on one day. You might just start with one, and then as you do your Plan, Do, Study, Act process, you then might expand that to a few more patients or a cohort of patients or a specific process itself. So it's about you starting small with a doable test of change. So this is where we move to the do here, and you can see the big arrow saying this is where all the testing starts. So in the do part, you are carrying out that test of change according to the plan that you did in the plan stage. You're going to record your observations, you know, what happened, the expected and the unexpected, and you'll start to begin your analysis. So that's your do, your test of change. And then you move to the study stage. So you've got your plan, you've done your small test of change. You're going to look at the data and analysis in relation to what was expected and what wasn't expected, compare your predictions and summarize. So what have I learned from this? What can I take forward to the next test of change, and what might we want to do differently. And this is where the ACT comes in. So what are we going to do next? What changes are we going to make? And what's the next part of the cycle? You know, will we, what changes will we make? Will we adopt some? Will we adapt some of this? Might we abandon some of these things or some of the insights we've got? So what is it that we're going to do differently with our next test of change? And as I said, that might just be expanding the cohort, expanding the number of patients. Okay. So why is PDA cycles different to some traditional approaches? And the key area here is that traditional approaches tend to do a bit of planning and then they just get into all the doing. And then we forget about the study and the review and the ACT, the reflective piece, to then inform the next steps. What we want to do with the plan, do, study, act approach is we want to do a little bit more planning, do the doing, but make sure we do the study, act. Yeah, so the suggested time is, you know, you're probably going to spend 2 or 3 times more on planning than you probably previously would have done when you're doing a PDSA. But the joy then is that you're going to get a quicker result because you've focused on the thing that matters and that you want to understand more. So the key thing here is all about, you know, the doing part of improvement. And we don't just do one cycle, we'll do a number of cycles. So we've got our hunch and our theory. We do this small test of change. We take our learning from that cycle, we follow up. We take our learning from that test of change, and then we can start to expand and do things more at scale. Now, the great thing is here that, you know, it's about failing fast and learning quick. So we're not just going to adopt a process or a practice, you know, instantaneously. We're really going to test it out on a small scale and then expand it to see how it impacts at a larger scale. And so when we implement it more fully, we've got absolutely the greater opportunity of success. So any problems can be ironed out along the way through your testing cycles. So it's lots and lots of ideas, lots of tests of change, identifying by the people closest to the process. And as I said, it's freedom to fail. So you're learning what works and what doesn't without committing huge resources, huge time, and actually putting something at risk. So it's an absolute mindset here, a mindset of improvement, of learning, of doing, and of testing. A little bit about why do the multiple tests really reflects on what I've just said here. You can adapt and you can change to the different environments as you look to expand, you know, your test of change and your prototype. You can identify what changes you need to do. So you're actually going to minimize resistance as well, because you're involving, as you do these tests of change, you may well be involving more people as you're learning more and expanding more. So it's a great way of prototyping. So I'm going to miss that video for today, mindful of a little bit of time here, and I'm just going to move to say that what we're really talking about here is this mindset of one is prototyping, and you've got some examples on here from Dyson, his vacuum, his hairdryer, and also some surgical products from IDEO. And you know, I'm sure many of you will know that it took over 5,000 iterative attempts really for Dyson with his vacuum. Edison took over 10,000 prototypes for his light bulb. And to be fair, when we're at home and we're going to paint a wall, paint a new room, we usually go and get those little pots, don't we, from Homebase or whatever, and we end up testing about 10 and we still don't know which colour we want because we don't know how the light falls on the wall. But that's what we're talking about with, you know, PDSA. So it's about keeping that momentum. We've got to keep the momentum. We've got to keep the energy. And we need to think a bit more like children, exploratively. Okay. So to bring some of the model for improvement, those 3 core questions, and in particular today, the plan, do, study, act cycle, I just want to share with you a brief video here, which is by Paul Devlin, who is a member of the ESIS team, on how they implemented what are known as rapid tests of change. So they did these rapid tests of change over a 5-day period, and what they were working on is unscheduled care coordination. That they were looking to reduce avoidable ambulance dispatches and also hospital attendances. Again, this isn't about me telling you everything about Unscheduled Care Co. It's actually about how they use the PDSA cycle. And I think the next stages of some of this work will be looking at the priorities of the UEC recovery plan, won't they? So I'll hand over to Paul on this video just to see how they've used these rapid tests of change. Fabulous. So what you could hear there is, Paul was mentioning that it was rapid. It was over 1 week. They did 5 cycles of change over that week. They established a hypothesis, and then they tested out that hypothesis, that the tests of change were sequential. And, the next new ideas, the next ideas will also come off each test of change. And then the really, really significant impact and the great work of that just over that 5-day period by working. And what we also see is that absolutely working in collaboration. So I'll leave that example with you, and I'm sure we can source some more information about that should you wish. And just as a conclusion as well, again, I can see in the chat around tools and templates that you're asking for. In the slides here as well is a pilot project, which is a writing up and an example of a PDSA output on a page. So you've got your objectives, the method, the approaches used, the measures, and the impact. So that will be in the slide deck, and it just gives you an example of some of the templates that you can use. I'm now going to hand over to Kate, who's going to summarise for us with our section about new methodologies.
So thank you for handing it over to me. So some of you may have come across, I know there was some conversation in the chat earlier about some of slightly new approaches to delivering change. So new era methodologies could be crowdsourcing, it could be using human-centered design, it could be running sprints and agile. So we're just going to have a quick look at crowdsourcing now. Some of you may be aware, but NHS England runs a crowdsourcing platform called Solving Together, and it's a great resource, and hopefully over the next few weeks we'll be able to have opportunity to use it within this work that we're all doing. So here's Solving Together. Thank you. So just as we're coming near to the close, just this short quote, and it makes me smile, because it's kind of like, how many times have we put so much energy into fighting against a change where we should be putting our energy into building the change, building new. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Kate. So just to recap there then, that we've kind of tried to bring together today all of the learning that you've had over the last 3 weeks and consolidate it really. So today has been about giving you some advice on tools, techniques, tips, hints, etc., to utilize in the various parts of your journey, right from the outset of setting it up, getting ready to go, and then once you're off and on the track, how you keep it on track, how you use leadership skills, and as if you remember from Core Learning Event 2, you don't necessarily have to be the person in charge to be the leader of change. So what you might do to help keep you on track and leading things effectively. The turning data into intelligence session that was held last week, I know there was a lot of tools and techniques shared in that session, and again, these will all be available to you once the Future site is up and running. And then we've touched on a bit more today around, once you're up and running and getting going, the delivery aspects and the sustainability aspects and how you keep things on track. So hopefully that's kind of brought it all to a nice succinct little ending for everybody. We have got the Menti, so I think the next slide we've got the Menti code on there, haven't we? Brilliant, thank you. The Menti, I've just had a quick scan of what's been fed back already. It looks like we've only had a couple of people enter already. So if I could, please almost put a beg in there to ask you guys. It will literally take you 5 minutes, no more, probably less if you're a quick typer, to give us the feedback, because we can only deliver things that are useful and helpful to you if we hear from you. So we think what we've put on has hit the mark and has given you a good footing, a good foundation to set off on your improvement journeys once you start getting into your work stream modules in the next couple of weeks, but we might be wrong and we won't know unless you tell us. So please would desperately encourage you guys to complete the Menti. And then apologies, I did miss the resource one, Kate, if you could just step back there. There are lots of resources. We are very mindful that for 2 hours a week in a 4-week period, we have thrown an awful lot of information at people. And for those that this is the first time they're embarking on any kind of improvement science training, that's probably felt at times somewhat overwhelming, and we absolutely understand that. So just again, as a word of sort of advice and support, really, we're not completely moving away. There is going to be a sort of support mechanism put in place so that once you get going with your module work, you will have not only sort of learning events where you come together and talk about your piece of work specifically that you're doing, but there will be other support events that are being put on. So if you want to come back and you want to learn a bit more about process mapping specifically, we will be providing more information on that over the course of the next sort of 17 weeks or so as you're on your improvement journey. So we're not stepping away and leaving you completely alone now, but we're hoping that we've given you enough of a taster and enough signposting to other places where you can go and find a bit more detail, should you wish to. That means that when you do kick off week commencing the 18th of September with your core modules, your work stream modules, you're in a good place. But if you're not, let us know and we'll make sure that we get that right for future. So it just remains for me to say big thank you to all of the speakers today and for pulling all of this together. I was actually on a week's annual leave last week, so I left it in the very capable hands of my colleagues Rachel, Kate and Sarwar. So big thank you to those. Thank you to Wakas, who I think's done a fantastic comparing routine with the Q&A today. So thank you, Wakas. And most importantly, big thank you to you guys for attending and coming along, especially those that have been here for all 4 events, because I'm recognising some of the names now in the chat. So it's been great that you've been here with us all the way through. And remember, this is just the beginning. You're about to embark on what I hope you will find a very exciting journey of working on change ideas within your local area, based on those national work streams from the UEC recovery plan. So we wish you all the very best of luck. We know you'll be fabulous and we will be here should you need us. So have a great rest of your day, everybody. Take care and we will see you all soon.
Right, that's everybody off, so you can come off now, okay?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm so sorry to just pop up. I'm trying to stop your recording because otherwise it's going to disappear into the ether. So if you could not kick me out until I just try and do that. Oh, it won't let me. Why won't it let me?
It stops automatically when we get everybody off.
Yeah, but because it was set up automatically, the person who set it up automatically has gone off sick and then it just sits on her OneDrive. So I've logged in. If I start it and stop it, I should be able to get the recording, but it won't let me stop it. And it let me start it, so I've no idea why.
It stops and starts automatically at the beginning. When we all log on and when we all log off, it stops.
No, I joined at the beginning and I stopped the automatic recording and then restarted it. So it was me that started it. But now it's not letting me stop it. So I don't know what happens to the recording. Did somebody, it's still recording, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to bring this
okay.
rubbish into your space. I just don't want us to lose
it.
the recording.
No,
we can get it trimmed anyway afterwards. We just need to find out how to stop it then, don't we?
Yeah, it's grayed out on my. I think, can you leave the meeting running for 2 minutes? I'm going to try and log out and log back in with a different account and see if that helps. I'm so sorry.
So if we just, you don't mind if we just drop off then? We just leave it, we'll leave you there. We'll wait for you to come back on and then we'll go.
Can someone stay in? Like, just leave it running. You're right to stay in, Rachel. I'm so sorry, just because if we all leave, it'll stop, won't it?
Yeah. Okay, Jo.
Thank you. Well, Rachel, not sure if you're there. That's worked now. It's stopped. Oh,
Brilliant, my dear.
has it? Why is it still recording?
No, it's still recording.
Yeah, but it started again at 20 seconds. Oh gosh.